Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Welcome to our program. We often do a two-part series, and that's the case this week and next week. The topic is the issue of aging in America. All of you have seen a lot of data and statistics about this very important question, and the baby boomers are going to be retiring before long. We have a graying population, and there are many medical issues, and there are also housing issues. In fact, I recently saw a statistic that one of the fastest growing populations, not in raw numbers, but in a percentage basis, are people over 85. We're living much longer. That's the good news, and the challenge is how we serve that population. In order to accomplish this important task, I'm pleased to welcome to our program two individuals. First of all is Pearl Bouchard, who is the director of Region 1 of the Area Agency on Aging, and they are under the State Idaho Commission on Aging. She's very effective in her position, and we're delighted to have her here to discuss this important question. Pearl, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
And I'm equally pleased to have Jan Young, and she serves in the capacity as Ombudsman of the first region, the northern region of Idaho, dealing with the Idaho Commission on Aging, and in particular the responsibility of addressing the safety of our senior citizens who may be in such places as nursing homes. Jan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm very pleased to have our regular panelist, Erna Reinhardt, who's the Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and she will commence today's questioning.
Welcome to the show, both of you, Pearl and Jan. It's wonderful to have you here, and this will be an important topic for many of our viewers. My first question is for Pearl. Explain to us what the Commission on Aging is.
Idaho Commission on Aging is at the state level, and they are appointed by the governor. We have one commissioner from each of the 6 regions, and there's a state administrator. They have the responsibility of overseeing the programming and planning for services in the state of Idaho. And then the commission has designated regions which we represent for North Idaho.
And follow up with what kind of services you offer.
We have 3 primary functions. The first is planning responsibility, to be looking at the future population in the 5 counties of North Idaho and what that growth is doing and how we can be prepared for it. The second primary function is services that are delivered from our office, which include the Ombudsman, which Jan represents here today, and other services such as information and referral, case management. A key one is adult protection. And our third primary function is to distribute resources into the community, and about 52% of the federal and state dollars that we receive are then distributed by contract to people, organizations in the community who provide direct services to seniors in their homes.
Excellent. And explain, I have one more question before we go on. How are you funded? You mentioned state and federal. Is that the basis of your funding?
Predominantly, yes. Our federal funds represent about 40% of our resources, state pretty close to 40% as well. And then 20% is from, we have United Way, donations which clients contribute to the program, and a dollar value that we haven't placed on the volunteer efforts that are provided throughout the community.
And are the services free? Or not?
Many of them are free. Some ask for a donation, such as the meals that are provided in senior centers. They ask for a donation. There are 2 services which include the homemaker service, which we do have a fee. It's based on income. But surprisingly, Erna, what we find is only about 5% of the people who are receiving services that are asked to pay a fee really qualify based on their income to pay a fee.
Great.
We have viewers in 7 states and our friends in Canada. And so even though we're going to be emphasizing on these programs, the situation in Idaho and the growth and the population you serve, I do want to think of our viewers in other states. And so I know that you have communication not only in your region, but certainly, as you said, with the Idaho Commission on Aging. And what's happened in this state is similar to other states. Pearl, I'll start with you on this, and we're going to wait a few minutes to deal with the Ombudsman, which is very, very important. But I introduced the program indicating that the population of over 65 is growing in the country rapidly, and then the baby boomers are about to retire. Can you share with viewers in our other states what's happening in sister organizations in other states? Is it much the same or equivalent to what we're seeing in our state?
It is very much so, and you bring up a good point that area agencies on aging, they are named in the Older Americans Act, which is federal legislation. And so what you see in North Idaho is duplicated all across the country.
So all over the country they have commission or offices on aging, and then they have area under those commissions.
Correct. And everywhere we are seeing this tremendous growth. And what's been really difficult throughout the country is that the resources that have been dedicated have not increased as the population has been growing. And so we have a tremendous amount of responsibility named within the Older Americans Act, and we continue to try to deliver those services with shrinking amount of dollars. Although they haven't really shrunk in terms of being taken away, they haven't increased in terms of inflation or in terms of the growth in the population.
Yet your population is growing that you serve.
That's right.
So a dollar doesn't go as far. It's spread for more people. One other question on this, and then I want to get into some more statistics. But when you talk about, from Ernest's question, the division of funding, is it pretty similar across America that the percentage is about the same? Or in some states, are there more dollars available, say, from state funding or from private sources?
It's interesting that you asked that question because I recently took a look at some different states, including Florida, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and tried to compare them with Idaho. And it is different from state to state. In Florida, because it's such a huge population there, you see a very small amount, although the state does contribute a lot of funding. In states like Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, you see tremendous support from states and actually far exceed the amount of dollars that are coming in from the federal government. So a lot of it depends on the legislature and the interest of the community in forwarding this kind of service to our elders.
Back to Florida for a second. It's such a huge retired population. Arizona would be another example. From the political science viewpoint, I would say that the larger population, the more political influence it would have. So when you talk about funds in Florida, is that being affected by this very large constituent?
I would expect so, yes. And, you know, the more the population dominates, is dominated by that age group, the more concerned, the more obvious it becomes to the general public that there are problems. In a lot of respects, it's a hidden problem.
Now we want to go to Jan. And Jan, thank you equally for being with us today. You have a very, very serious and important charge, and that deals with ombudsmen. And so we'll do part of it here, and we'll do part of it next week too. But the population that you're most responsible for, I would, correct me if I'm wrong, I would describe it more as the more elderly members of senior citizens in declining health, some frail, some of them with not the ability to, if they have dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. 2 parts. One is, what does the Idaho law and the commission direct you to do, is part one. We'll start with that.
Well, as an ombudsman, I go into the skilled nursing facilities along with the assisted living facilities in the 5 northern counties, and I advocate for the residents. I educate the residents and their families. I educate staff. I educate community. I try and get information out to anyone that wants to listen to me. But basically it's going and making visits, regular visits, to each of the facilities, talking with the residents, seeing how their quality of care is, how their quality of life is. If I find that I see something, then I'll go to the administrator or whoever is in charge of the facility and talk with them. And most of the time they come around and make things better.
Do you have to, I get confused about the different categories. We have what we call nursing homes. We have what we call assisted living facilities. Is there a third one, or are those the two mostly that you're responsible for?
The two that I'm responsible for, the skilled nursing, the nursing homes, and assisted living facilities. And those are a facility with 8 beds or more. I have been told that if I get a complaint now from someone that is at home in the community, because so many of our seniors are wanting to stay home rather than go into a facility, that I am supposed to address that. But I haven't really been involved in any of that yet.
But that third category, they would be in their home but need some kind of assistance and help, even though they're not in an assisted living facility is an actual facility where there's a number of people there, and it's run by some, I assume, private entity.
Yes.
But the assisted living areas too, there's less care needed than in a nursing home because they're more independent.
Sometimes, yeah. Okay. They're taking more. The complaints I might get from the community would be from clients that are home and community based, in a home and community based setting, and they might have a caregiver who's going in and helping them out.
Now, what I was asking Pearl, this is not unique to Idaho. All over the country, this is part of the legislation, too, that we're talking about concerning commissions on aging. So they do this all over the country. Now for the difficult challenge. I'm sure across America, in those area agencies, they have more assistance than you do. You've got 5 counties, is that correct? Mm-hmm. That's a significant number of nursing homes and assisted living. And aren't you kind of a loner? That is, you have to do pretty much that yourself?
I do. I have 48 assisted living facilities, and there are new ones that are coming up all the time. And I have 10 skilled nursing facilities. And I have had, I've been working at the agency in October. It will be 5 years. And there was a full-time, and then I was part-time up until the past ombudsman, Myron Higbee, retired. And then I took over. Since then, I have had 2 volunteers that basically have just been going in and doing friendly visits. They really don't address the complaints. I have started a volunteer program, so happy to say now I have 6 volunteers.
But as volunteers, they don't have the authority that you do under the law.
Yeah, they don't do investigating.
They can bring some information to you, but you have to go do it. And I want to go back to Erna, but one final thing. Can you go unannounced, or do you all...
All my visits are unannounced.
Okay. Erna, I'm going to come back to you, and then my next round I want to show a few charts about... Idaho, again, would be similar to other countries, but we'll come back to you first.
I'll start with Pearl. Pearl, your agency offers such a wide spectrum of services. So let's start by talking about maybe what are some of the services that people would come to you early on in their needs, and how do you address, how do you go about serving them and fulfilling what they need? Tell us about that process.
Okay, let's just take an example of an individual or family member who sees their loved one is deteriorating. They might be living in North Dakota, and they don't know what services exist to support their parent. And so they can call us on an 800 number from anywhere in the country, and they would start by asking for information. And so we would interview and try to get a sense of what they're looking for. If they have just simple information needs, that can be addressed right away by phone. If it looks like things are fairly complicated and they might need more support in the home than just information, then we have available case managers who are licensed social workers, and they will go into the home and sit and visit with them and the family.
I'm going to interrupt. On the screen here now, we have a telephone number, a local one, and then a website, if you tell that, plus the 800 number, because also people in other states that we see, if they don't know, they could call you and you could refer them back to their state. So let's take all those numbers right now. Your local number is a 208 number.
And I'll be darned if I don't know the 800 number, but we'll have to get that for the next show.
But the local number is 208-667-3179. And then would you give the website for those who another room and they're just listening? Would you give the website?
www.agingadult, S as in Sam, V as in Victor, C as in Cat, S as in Sam.org.
But you could refer people to their own state. You would have a booklet on their directory.
Both directions. We can either refer out of state or we can take calls from out of state people who have family members living here.
And Jen, do you know the 800 number, did you?
I don't.
Okay, we'll get that later.
Give us some tips on those conversations that we may or should be having with our parents as they approach those elderly years, and especially those parents that may not welcome those kinds of services.
That's a good question, Erna. It is a conversation that all of us should have. I was just talking with my sisters last weekend about the need for us to do that very thing. And, you know, it starts with really understanding. I think what we all want to do is honor the wishes of our family members. And in the case of adults, these are people who you assume are going to be competent, and so they can make their own decisions. And that's important to honor, that they have a right to make their own decisions. And what we find is that most people do want to stay in their own homes. And so in order to do that, you're looking at what kind of support could come into the home to help them. And the very first thing our social workers do is they start to ask about informal caregiving that can be provided. So it's good to ask who in the family might be willing to help out first, because actually 38% of the cost of providing care to our elderly population is provided by family, informal support. And so that's the first thing to do, is look to the family and say, okay, who amongst us is going to be here when mom and dad needs the help? And if you decide that there isn't anybody there, then you would want to start looking at some of the kinds of services in the community. It could be very simple, like a meal being delivered because they're not eating very well. And it isn't uncommon to hear about a piece of toast for breakfast and a cup of coffee. And that isn't good nutrition. And the more the nutrition goes down, the more the health problems go up. So it could be a simple thing like meals being delivered. If they're not able to keep up with housework, in that instance, you want things to stay sanitary so that there isn't going to be any infection. And so there can be support with keeping the house clean. If someone is getting to the point where their competency is at question, then you're starting to look at issues that the Ombudsman might handle with assisted living or nursing home care or adult protection.
Erna, that was such an excellent question, and if we could just bridge that over to Jan, the same kind of relevance there is when a parent winds up in a nursing home, in particular, and really reaches the point that they cannot make decisions for themselves. Next week we're going to talk about some of those problems that we've seen and some of us are very, very concerned about. But children can be very helpful there. You can't do everything as one human being. Would you share with the viewers, for people who have their parents already in the center or maybe going into them, what do they need to do? And I'll just use the word to police the action, that is, to make sure that their parents are being properly cared for. We've heard some examples all over the country of very serious abuses in recent years. So give those children some real good advice.
That's a tough thing to do. My father had Alzheimer's, and my mother cared for him at home up until the last 6 months. And you would think that me being the ombudsman, I would be able to put my father into a facility and he would get great care. I mean, you know, his daughter is the ombudsman, and that's not the case. We stayed with him all the time. We had people popping into the facilities. You have to keep monitoring their care. Are they getting care? Are they not? one of the first things that goes are the teeth. If they have dentures, teeth come out, because my dad was a challenge. He was one of those real challenges that he was tough to care for, and they, don't want anybody doing anything to them. So you have to really, just keep on top of it. Go to the facility, visit, ask questions. Ask, did they eat? Another real big problem is they stop eating, and that's when they really go downhill. So you can't just place someone in a facility and expect that they're going to get good care. You have to monitor it, and I think monitoring on a daily basis. I have a lot of families that call me and want me to do the monitoring, and I say, I have so many facilities, I'm lucky if I get there once a quarter, unless it's right in the Coeur d'Alene area. So just read all the paperwork, investigate, call the agency and we have lots of information on different things to look for. I refer them to read books.
Another area that I want to get into quickly, I just have such an interest in this issue, and I've seen some real problems recently. Talked to some legal counsel, not me personally involved with family members, but just being so interested in the whole process and legislation. I guess the word I'd use was appalled at some documents that the residents were asked to sign that went so far that they would take authority away from the children. So would you talk to children about be careful what they and their parents sign?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of the residents that are in their late 70s, 80s, have dementia or Alzheimer's, and they aren't making good judgment. I know a lady who became a friend of someone and each month gave her pension check and her Social Security check over to this individual. Well, our hands are tied. The police hands are tied.
So wouldn't it be a good idea to, if you're going to put a parent in, to have the document looked at by an attorney? Or sometimes would it be a good idea, if it's truly clear that dementia is serious or Alzheimer's, that guardianship be set up before they go in?
Families should really stay on top of it and be there when they're being admitted or when any papers are being signed. If they notice that something is going on, such as Alzheimer's, or they're making really poor judgments, then yes, they need to contact an attorney for, information as far as guardianship, because if they don't have guardianship, that person is able to do what they want to do.
And then once they sign that, it becomes a real legal hassle to do anything about it. Of course, you can go to court and you could deal with it, but that's very time-consuming and very expensive. I just wanted to make some real important points about that.
Tony, if I could
Sure.
address that just briefly, too. A lot of what we see happening is people wait until they're in crisis.
Yes.
To deal with these situations, whether it's taking care of mom or dad at home because they've had a hospital discharge, or they get discharged from the hospital and they're being admitted into a facility like Jan is talking about. And when there's a crisis, reading that paperwork is the last thing that A, you can either do, or B, you can absorb. And so it's so important, like Erna asked, to plan ahead for these things, know what you're getting into before that crisis occurs.
Pearl, let me follow up a little bit, because you're the director of all this and you work with all the staff, and certainly Jan has shared a lot with you, but there are a lot of different kinds of nursing homes and how they're administered, or also the whole issue of assisted living. Isn't it a good idea to shop around before, or maybe Jan, you want to take that?
Yes. Go in, look, keep your senses alive, smell, listen, look to see how the staff is interacting with the residents. Listen to how they're talking to them. Look and see what the residents are doing. If they're just sitting there doing nothing, that's not good. They need to have activities. They need to be stimulated. So eat the food. See what the food tastes like. And don't just go once, go many times. I've had residents that have gone into one facility and really not gotten along with staff or the facility. And so the family will call me or the resident will, and I'll start talking to them. And maybe they have a real interest in music. They played a musical instrument. And I'll say, okay, well, I have some facilities where there's a lot of people that are musicians, and that's what they do. So go and visit it. And they do, and go in there, and they get along real good. So it all depends on the person, the level that they're at, and go.
And Pearl, I'd go back to you and say that also some of these are private owned they just have one facility, it's locally owned. Others are large corporations and they have 40, 50 around the country. There's a lot of different ways that they're set up and operated. Would you advise, too, that a family, before doing this, can't they have some record to look at, see if they've had a lot of complaints or if they lost court cases? Or
There is actually access on a website,
Okay.
and anyone who interested could call our office and get that information, where the quality standards are all displayed on all of these facilities. And they're all very different, and their ability to be able to have a good staff to client ratio is a challenge.
So in other words, it's public record if they've had litigation or if they've lost cases or whatever, that's available.
Jan, is it?
I don't know about the litigation. They do.
But any court action is a public record. I don't know where it's on a website or not, but certainly
They would have to dig a little bit for that.
you could ask the questions. And in other words, anytime there's court action in civil and criminal matters, afterwards there's public record. We accept, as I understand, the only exception would be that, juveniles, which is not what we're dealing with, that their records are sealed oftentimes. Well, on that note, we have to bring the permanent conclusion, but the good news is you'll both be back next week. And Pearl, next week, I want the charts I didn't get to, the graphs, we'll do those again next week. And,
Great.
And it's the kind of subject that we wanted to give 2 weeks to. We don't think 1 week is enough to do that. And thank you both for your time. It's been most informative. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like for you to be with us again next week, and we'll do part 2 on the issue of aging in America. We really think that it's so important how we protect all of our people, and particularly the elderly and children who oftentimes cannot lobby for themselves. Until next week, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.
Work, investigate, call. I'm lucky if I get there once a quarter.
state funding or from yet your population's growing that you serve. Especially if you feel they're not appreciating all the because they're frustrated too.
Or they're doing it. A lot of, spouses think. I just tell them, no, they aren't, because they don't know. They don't know any better. They're doing it because they're doing it.
We got the 800 number this time, didn't we?
Yes.
Okay.
It's going to be up there. Don't ask me to repeat it, though. Although I could read it off of the screen.
Yeah, you can look at the screen. And I had to really get the other one I have on your side, so I had to look really careful to get that one. I was hoping you were going to come in and say, it is.
Maybe I'll take my card out and then I can...
Yeah, that would be a great idea. Because I have... Okay, I'm not ready to go yet. Now, this is extremely informative. It's the kind of thing that almost everyone has to deal with. So.
Yes. Grandchildren even are doing it.
Mm-hmm. Of course, some people are so, I guess I call this fortunate. They live at a certain age, and my grandmother did on my side. She was on the hospital once in 82 years, and for a week, she gave birth to 15 children at home. And when she died, she had lunch with her daughter, sat down on the couch, and died.
Oh.
Those are the great lucky ones.
That's the way to go.
She never had to worry about any of that. She was one tough cookie.
Tony, are you ready?
We're ready to go.